Look at your neighbor and tell them, failure is not my funeral. Too many of us are scared of failing, not because failure is deadly, but because failure is embarrassing. We're afraid of what people will say, afraid of how it will look, afraid of trying again after we've already fallen once. But hear me today, failure is not proof that God has rejected you. Failure is evidence that you had the courage to try. If failure could stop destiny, David would still be a shepherd, Peter would still be a fisherman, and you would still be stuck in fear. You didn't fail because you're weak. You failed because you were growing. So today, I didn't come to motivate you. I came to liberate you. Because the moment you stop being afraid to fail is the moment you finally give yourself permission to win. Fear of failure is rarely about the failure itself. It is about faces, voices, whispers, and imagined reactions. It is about standing in front of people who watched you announce your dream and wondering how they will look at you if it doesn't work out. We say we are scared of failing, but the truth is we are scared of being judged, scared of being labeled foolish, scared of being talked about, scared of becoming the example people use when they say, I told you so. I told you so. And most people don't stop because the road is hard. They stop because the audience is loud. They stop because opinions feel heavier than purpose. They stop because rejection hurts more than regret, at least in the moment. Judgment has a way of shrinking big dreams into small, safe decisions. It convinces you to play it low, stay quiet, and blend in, not because you lack ability, but because you don't want the spotlight to turn harsh. But here is the painful irony. The same people you are afraid of disappointing are often not invested in your destiny. They are observers, not contributors. They didn't carry the vision. They didn't feel the burden. They won't carry the consequences of your silence. Yet their opinions can still paralyze you if you let them. Fear of judgment gives strangers power over choices that were meant to be guided by purpose. Judgment feels dangerous because it attacks identity, not just performance. Failure says, this didn't work. Judgment says, you are the problem. That is why it cuts so deeply. But people judge through the lens of their own fears. They criticize what they were too afraid to attempt. They mock what they never had the courage to pursue. When you understand that, judgment loses its authority. Every breakthrough requires a moment where you decide whose voice matters most. The crowd will always have an opinion, but the crowd never carries the calling. If you wait for universal approval, you will die with unrealized potential. Destiny demands the courage to be misunderstood. Growth requires the strength to disappoint people who preferred the old version of you. The moment you stop living for applause, you start living in purpose. And when judgment no longer controls you, failure no longer terrifies you, it becomes just another step forward. Not a verdict on who you are, but proof that you dared to move. Failure feels final only when you misunderstand its purpose. We treat it like a grave, like something that marks the end of the story, when in reality it is a classroom designed to teach what success never could. Success tells you what worked once. Failure shows you what needs to change to last. It slows you down long enough to examine your foundation, your methods, your motives, and your mindset. Nothing about failure is wasted unless you refuse to learn from it. A coffin closes you in, but a classroom opens you up. Failure asks questions. It exposes gaps in discipline, character, preparation, and patience. It reveals what you leaned on that could not support you. Many people want elevation without education, but growth demands instruction, and instruction often comes wrapped in disappointment. Failure humbles you enough to listen, to reflect, and to adjust. It strips away arrogance and replaces it with wisdom. Some lessons cannot be learned through applause. You don't learn resilience when everything goes right. You don't develop endurance when the road is smooth. You don't discover your true strength until resistance introduces itself. Failure becomes the environment where endurance is built, faith is tested, and clarity is sharpened. It forces you to confront who you are without the validation of success. Failure also teaches timing. Sometimes you didn't fail because the vision was wrong, but because the season was. You were ahead of your resources, ahead of your maturity, ahead of your support system. Failure pushes you back into preparation. not punishment. It sends you to study what you skipped, to develop what you rushed, to strengthen what you assumed would hold. That delay is not denial, it is development. When you see failure as a teacher, it loses its power to shame you. Shame says you are unworthy. Instruction says you are unfinished. One condemns, the other equips. Failure does not define you, it refines you. It removes weak strategies, shallow commitments, and false confidence. What remains is stronger, wiser, and more grounded. Every great builder has torn something down that didn't work. Every skilled leader has outgrown early mistakes. Every person walking in purpose has sat in the uncomfortable seat of failure long enough to learn what success would later demand. Failure does not end the journey. It prepares you for the next level of it. We often believe that God only works through perfect plans and flawless performances, but that belief collapses the moment you look honestly at any story of purpose. God has never waited for people to get everything right before using them. He works through broken attempts, interrupted journeys, and imperfect obedience. What disqualifies many is not failure, but the false belief that failure disqualifies them. Broken attempts carry humility, and humility creates space for grace. When something falls apart, it exposes our limits and forces us to rely on something greater than our own strength. That dependence is not weakness, it is alignment. God is not impressed by self-sufficiency. He responds to surrender. Often, it is in the moment when your plan collapses that divine direction becomes clear. Many people never move because they think God requires certainty before action. But faith has never been about certainty. It has always been about trust. You step forward without knowing everything, and God meets you in the movement. Even when your steps are uneven, even when your execution is messy, obedience still carries power. God can redirect a moving person, but it is hard to guide someone who refuses to move at all. Broken attempts also reveal intention. You may miss the mark, but the willingness to try shows a heart that is open and available. God honors availability more than accuracy. Some doors do not open because you did everything right. They open because you showed up with a willing spirit. Failure does not mean you were outside of God's will. Sometimes it means you were brave enough to attempt what required growth you had not yet developed. What looks like a mistake to you can become material for transformation. God has a way of recycling pain, disappointment, and missed outcomes into wisdom and purpose. Nothing offered sincerely is wasted. The attempt that embarrassed you may be the experience that equips you to help someone else survive their own moment of collapse. Broken attempts create empathy, depth, and authority that success alone cannot produce. Grace does not erase effort, it empowers it. God does not excuse passivity, but He redeems persistence. When you fall and get back up, you are not starting over from nothing. You are starting again with insight, humility, and strength you did not have before. God uses what is surrendered, not what is hidden. When you bring your broken attempts instead of burying them in shame, you make room for growth, direction, and purpose to emerge stronger than before. Comfort feels safe, but it is deceptive. It whispers that staying where you are is wisdom, when in reality, it is often fear disguised as stability. Comfort zones do not usually look dangerous. They look familiar. They look like routine, predictability, and control. But nothing truly called to grow can survive in a place where nothing is required of it. Purpose demands movement, and comfort resists it. A calling is not activated by convenience. It is activated by challenge. The moment you choose what is easy over what is necessary, growth begins to suffocate. Comfort asks you to manage what you have. Calling asks you to stretch beyond what you know. One preserves, the other transforms. Remaining comfortable may protect your feelings, but it slowly starves your potential. The danger of comfort is not that it hurts you suddenly, but that it erodes you quietly. You don't feel yourself shrinking. You don't notice the dulling of passion or the weakening of courage. Over time, dreams become memories and vision becomes nostalgia. You begin to measure your life by what you avoided instead of what you attempted. That slow erosion is why comfort is so dangerous to purpose. Calling always disrupts comfort. It demands risk, vulnerability, and exposure. It requires you to step into spaces where failure is possible and judgment is likely. But that discomfort is not punishment, it is preparation. Muscles grow under resistance, not ease. Faith matures when it is tested, not when it is sheltered. The stretching you resist may be the very thing shaping you for what you prayed for. Comfort keeps you in control, but control is often the enemy of growth. When everything is predictable, there is no room for expansion. Calling invites you into uncertainty because uncertainty creates dependence, adaptability, and strength. You cannot become who you are meant to be while protecting who you used to be. Growth requires release. Many people confuse peace with comfort, but they are not the same. Peace can exist in chaos when purpose is present. Comfort disappears the moment challenge arrives. Calling sustains you even when the road is difficult because it connects you to meaning beyond convenience. When you choose calling over comfort, you may lose ease, but you gain depth, strength, and direction. And in that space of stretching, your purpose finally has room to breathe and grow. Failure becomes destructive only when it pushes you backward instead of forward. The issue is not that you failed, but what you do next. Some people fall and retreat, allowing disappointment to convince them that trying again is foolish. Others fall and study the ground, learning how to land differently the next time. The difference between defeat and development is direction. Failure should move you forward with insight, not trap you in regret. Moving forward after failure requires reflection, not rejection of yourself. When something doesn't work, the temptation is to internalize it as personal inadequacy. But failure is feedback, not a final verdict. It points to what needs adjustment, refinement, or reinforcement. If you learn nothing, the fall repeats. If you learn something, the fall becomes a foundation for progress. Forward motion does not ignore pain, it interprets it. Failing backward looks like shame, isolation, and avoidance. It convinces you to hide your attempt, rewrite your story, and pretend you never wanted it in the first place. That retreat may feel protective, but it quietly reinforces fear. Failing forward, on the other hand, keeps you engaged. It allows disappointment to inform you without defining you. You remain connected to your purpose even while correcting your course. Every step forward after failure builds resilience. Resilience is not the absence of falling. It is the refusal to stay down. Each time you rise with more awareness, you gain strength that cannot be taught through theory. Experience becomes wisdom when it is processed, not suppressed. Failing forward transforms pain into preparation. Forward failure also reshapes confidence. Confidence rooted in perfection is fragile. Confidence shaped by recovery is durable. When you know you can fall and rise again, fear loses its power. You stop measuring your worth by outcomes and start grounding it in perseverance. That shift changes how you approach future challenges. You become bolder, not because you expect to succeed every time, but because you trust yourself to adapt. Progress is rarely linear. Advancement often includes setbacks that redirect rather than destroy. When you fail forward, you stay in motion. Even if the pace slows, you adjust your strategy without abandoning your vision. Failure then becomes part of the journey, not a detour from it. Each attempt carries you closer, not because it was flawless, but because you refuse to let failure send you backward into fear and silence. What you are afraid of trying today may be the very thing standing between you and the life you've been praying for. Fear has a way of exaggerating the danger of stepping forward, convincing you that the risk is greater than the reward. But often, the only barrier between you and victory is the hesitation to take the next step. Your breakthrough is waiting not where it is comfortable, but where courage meets action. Every great achievement, every story of triumph began on the other side of fear. Fear makes the unknown seem larger than it is. It paralyzes, convinces, and delays. It whispers that failure will define you, that disappointment will crush you, that trying again is foolish. But the truth is nothing you fear has the authority to stop destiny unless you allow it. What feels risky to your mind may be necessary for your soul. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of it. Victory is reserved for those willing to cross the threshold where fear has been standing guard. The road beyond fear is rarely smooth, but it is always purposeful. There will be obstacles, doubts, and setbacks, but each challenge carries a lesson essential to your growth. If you retreat at the first sign of discomfort, you remain stuck, circling in the same patterns, hoping for change without risking it. Movement, even when uncertain, creates opportunities for insight, resilience, and progress. Each step forward builds momentum that fear cannot easily overcome. Faith and action are inseparable on the other side of fear. You cannot wait for fear to disappear before you act. That day may never come. Faith requires a step before clarity, a leap before the path is fully visible. When you step forward, you invite guidance, support, and resources that were previously out of reach. The very act of moving transforms fear into fuel, turning hesitation into power. Victory is often disguised as a risk. What you imagine as danger is often the gateway to growth. If you avoid it, you miss what you were created to experience. The moment you embrace fear as a signal, not a stop sign, you reclaim authority over your life. The next chapter, the next success, the next blessing, whatever you have been longing for, is waiting on the other side of the thing you've been afraid to do. Courage does not guarantee that the path will be easy, but it guarantees that you are finally moving toward what you were born to achieve. Your destiny does not reside in comfort. It lives in the spaces you are afraid to enter. Take the step, cross the fear, and claim what is waiting for you. So now I want you to hear me clearly. Failure is not your enemy. Fear is not your captor. Doubt is not your final verdict. What has been standing in your way is the lie that you are not enough, the lie that a fall defines you, the lie that trying and stumbling is somehow shameful. But let me tell you something tonight. You were never designed to live small, safe, or silent. Every great story you've ever admired started with someone who dared to fail, someone who got back up when the world told them to stay down, someone who risked ridicule, criticism, and disappointment because they understood that their calling was greater than their comfort. And what is true for them is true for you. What is waiting for you on the other side of fear, on the other side of failure, is the life you were born to live, the purpose you were born to fulfill, the victory you were born to experience. So I want you to make a promise to yourself tonight. I want you to stand in this moment and declare, I will no longer let the fear of failing stop me from trying. I will no longer let the opinions of others determine my worth. I will no longer hide my dreams or shrink my light because the road looks too hard. I will rise, I will move, I will risk, and I will grow. Because failure is not final. Fear is not fatal. What is fatal is inaction. Your destiny is calling, and it is waiting for the moment you refuse to let fear have the final word. Step forward. Try again. Fail forward. Rise higher. The world is not ready for the greatness inside you, but you must be ready to release it anyway. Tonight, choose courage. Tonight, choose faith. Tonight, choose victory. And watch how God will honor your boldness, your persistence, and your willingness to rise. You will not stay down. You will not settle. You will not be afraid. And that, my friends, is how you turn failure into triumph.